Hello from Platts of Marlow. Now, I had the honour of sitting down and talking to the chairman of Platts of Marlow. We talked about so much. The history of the company, the London to Brighton drives, his first ever car. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the one, the only, JP.
I'm Jim Platt, chairman of Platt's Motor Company in Marlow. The firm was founded by my father in 1925, and my father had actually trained as taken an apprenticeship and trained as an engineer with a company in Slough. But he'd had problems getting a job after that, and therefore he thought he would set up on his own in Marlow. I was in Ball Age from 1946 through to 1952. After that I went to Imperial College in London, where I did a degree in mechanical engineering. And then from there, in fact, I did a graduate apprenticeship with CAV up in London, CAV Lucas. And in those days, of course, everybody had to do their national service. So and I was always quite keen on the river, etc., etc. I'd done quite a lot of rowing, both for Ballways and for Marlow Rowing Club. And so my bent was towards the Navy, and so I was very fortunate and got a commission in the Navy as an engineering officer. So we did two and a bit years with the Navy. In 1960, that would be, I joined the firm here, basically looking after our service department. Mechanical things have always interested me. I used to do a lot with Meccano sets and things like that, and build lots of bits and pieces from Meccano. I'd always been interested in taking things to pieces, putting them back together. I seem to have a reasonably aptitude for that sort of thing. I suppose one of the most inspirational cars that I had was the first really sports car that I had, which was in fact an MGA, and that would have been in the mid-60s it was. And the thing I can always remember about that car is just about the time when the motorways started, and I think it would be in the first month of the M1 open, we took the car up to that and did that marvellous thing of 100 miles an hour. So that was a bit of a special day. Obviously we started here in the showroom, and then we moved our main service department up into Oxford Road. The building then was about half the size of what it is today. But of course, at the beginning of the war, at least half of that building was actually requisitioned for the storage of aeroplanes. And in fact, I used to enjoy myself going up there after school and sitting in these aeroplanes and imagining that I was actually one of the fighter pilots. That perhaps really spurred my interest in flying. One of the things, rather than come into the motor trade, I was quite interested in flying, but I was very, very surprised to find, in fact, that I was colourblind. It was a really big surprise to me. I'd never realised that. What happened then, of course, half of the building was taken up by aircraft, etc. So there was, and in fact, the majority of our mechanics, as they would be called in those days, were off in the war. Our apprentices and mechanics were off in the war. And in fact, what happened was there was a lot of home industry going on, so we had another building built up at the site there, which we employed about, I should think about 10 local ladies, and we were actually assembling little electric motors, which we thought were for cameras in the aircraft, small, and that went on for about 4 or 5 years, assembling up these things during the war. There was one really big lot of bombs, which would have been about 1943, I think it was, and there was a whole string of bombs from about Temple all the way down through into Marlow. Must have been 60, 70, 80 bombs dropped. I can remember actually being out in the garden and seeing these on a beautiful summer's afternoon, sunny summer's afternoon, and seeing all these German bombers up there with, in their formation dropping the bombs. We always thought that we were told, sort of propaganda-wise, if you like, we were told that the British fighters went up and the Germans got scared and they dropped all their bombs. But in retrospect, what I think it was, I think they were actually trying to, on Danesfield, where all this photographic reconnaissance was done. And it seems very strange that all the bombs were just down the river. But it was fortunately the majority of the bombs all fell in the fields rather than coming down and towards the town. The biggest change initially, of course, was the introduction of the Mini. When that came in about 1961, that was a major change from anything we'd ever had before. This was the first car with front-wheel drive, integrated gearbox, and just a revolutionary small car. And that was an absolute step change. Previous to that, we'd had the very reliable and very well thought of the Morris Thousands, but then suddenly the Mini came on the scene, and I can remember the price of the Mini was about £520, I think, for a brand new Mini in 1961. Nobody knew exactly what the Metro was going to be like. You had to have it in the showroom. Eventually had to be covered over with cloths, and people weren't allowed to take the cloths off the Metro. The public weren't allowed to see it. And this was, in those days, of course, the introduction of a new car was a significant event. Thinking in terms that it will be an absolute game changer with regard in the motor industry when we move to electric vehicles. And very exciting times, something totally different to what we've ever had before, a really big challenge, and there will be many changes that we'll have to adapt to. We've got an electric charging port all ready to go. Of course, one of my interests is, in fact, in older vehicles. When we were with the Austin Morris group, fairly early on, we managed to acquire a thing called a bullnose Morris, which was a 1925 bullnose Morris, which we renovated that and drive around with that. When we moved to Ford, what we wanted actually was the Model T Ford, as that really is the iconic. Everybody seems to know about the Model T Ford, so we thought we'd like to have a Model T Ford, so we did. And then shortly after that, I'd always been interested in the London to Brighton run, and particularly when I was up in Imperial College and seeing them going on the London to Brighton run on early November mornings. Used to turn out there, and I thought I'd really like to have a go with the London to Brighton run. And fortunately, a very good friend of ours introduced me to a Model A, which is one of my I have great pleasure in that particular vehicle, the Model A Ford, which was built in 1903. And so we've taken that, we've done it on about London to Brighton runs we've done for 12 or 14 times. I'm pleased to say that our car has always got that. Ford, from time to time, have introduced one of their cars into London to Brighton run. I think they've had rather more difficulty than we've had, so we can take great pride in that. The quality of our service is exceptional. Talking a little bit about the history of what we've done. In fact, the very first day that MOT tests were introduced into the country, we were one of the early pioneers of MOT testing vehicles. And would you believe, in those days, I think the MOT test was costing about 15 shillings for an MOT test. Likewise, thinking about servicing vehicles, when I first came into the business, we had to service vehicles every 1,000 miles. Every 1,000 miles was the servicing that was done.
Wow.
And I think the cost of a 1,000-mile service in those days, thinking about it, was about 12 shillings and 5p, something of that sort of amount it was. But because we were servicing every 1,000 miles, people who, particularly who did a lot of travelling, we would perhaps see them every month, and that is the great difference between what it is then, from then to now. And we used to have fewer customers who we saw on a very regular basis. Then from that, from 1,000-mile servicing, it went to 3,000-mile servicing. And when it went from 3,000-mile service to 6,000-mile service, we began to think the end of the world was coming. But fortunately, of course, the motoring public was expanding, and therefore we saw more people, but less number of times. I was quite keen on car washing, and well, I think just the technical side of the car washing, because of course we used to wash all the cars by hand, and so I've been around seeing car washes here and there, and so initially actually I built my own car wash initially, but not actually with moving brushes and that, but sort of high pressure sprays, and they had an archway that would move backs and forwards over the cars, trying to reduce the amount of time that people were spending actually washing cars, trying to turn them around more quickly. That soon proved to be not a highly satisfactory system that we'd employed. So for now we decided we would like to go for a proper automatic car wash. The car wash that we had today was proving to be so popular that we decided we'd go for a jet wash as well. So we've had jet washers for quite a number of years now. And the big recent change of car washing has in fact been changing from coinage to contactless, and that has been the next step, the big step forward within car wash. And in fact, we were one of the first companies in the country to have a contactless car wash. When my father first came into the business, in fact initially we had a Ford franchise for a number of years, but I think that perhaps didn't fit too well with the population of Marlow. I don't really know exactly why it was, because there were Morris and MG cars and that sort of thing were being built in Oxford, and we saw a lot of those vehicles around. So at fairly early days we changed from Ford to Morris, and then that carried on, became the British Motor Corporation, which incorporated Austin. We were dealers for MGs. My father was very, very keen on MGs, etc., etc. And then that went through from British Motor Corporation to Leyland Cars, and then to Rover Cars, and incorporated Triumph Cars as well. So there was a big corporate franchise with all these various makes incorporated into the one particular franchise. However, they had a reputation for not being particularly reliable, and in fact Ford had a reputation for being rather more reliable, and so the reliability of what we were selling was causing us problems. And suddenly Ford came along to us in the mid-80s and said, would you like to change from Austin Morris cars to Ford cars? We thought about it and realised, yes, that this would be an big step forward as far as the company was concerned. And so then we changed from Austin Morris through to Ford. And my son decided he would like to come into the business, and he has been, that's Tim Platt, and he has been here as a dealer principal. With regard to staffing, yes, I think we are very fortunate. We've had many members of staff who've been with us for, I would say, a lifetime. In fact, I think we can say we've had 4 or 5 people who started with us as apprentices and never took any other jobs. And in fact, there is still one person around now who started, in fact, who were in the company before I started. And other than doing his national service, he has been with us all the time as from a technician through to parts manager, and latterly has been helping with the MOT testing. So a lot of our staff members have been with us for many, many years. I don't know exactly why that is, whether I'm too kind to them. maybe I am. There's good and bad about it, I think, because you do, without doubt, you do get set in your ways. But it does give continuity for the customers, which I think is a very important thing. People like to come in and see the same faces, and we get to know the people by name, etc., etc. And also, I think I'm very gratified by the fact that quite a lot of our customers are proud of being our customers, and I'm surprised how often people say we've been customers here for 40 years. We've been buying cars from, this would be the 8th, 10th, 12th car that we bought from you, and they seem to actually be proud of being our customers, and I would sincerely like to thank all those people. They are the backbone of our company without any doubt. They are the backbone, and again our staff. How could I? The business is only as good as the people in it, and I'm most impressed with all the staff that we have, and I'm sincerely grateful to them for all the hard work, the dedication, hard work that they